Our clubs, our association, our allegiance to each other goes far beyond the mere promotion of our sports, special as our sports are. Our clubs are where we celebrate births, host christenings and birthdays, but also where we go to mourn each other and support each other in death. It's my experience as a member of my own club, Naviana in Glengormley, that has shaped my own aims and objectives as a lawyer. The experience of several of our members is delicately and sensitively recorded in this book. The murders of our club president, Sean Fox, in October 1993, my senior football manager, Jerry Devlin, at the gates of the club in December 1987, and of a young boy, Gerard Lawler, in July 2002. All of those events absolutely shaped my own personal interpretation of how I seen the world and how I assessed the social contract with the state arising from those murders. Needless to say, there has never been an arrest or a charge or a prosecution, much less a conviction for any of those murders, an experience shared by many gathered here today. Our clubhouse opened for the first time to host Jerry Devlin's wake, and in years of significant anniversaries since, we have ensured that Jerry's memory is kept alive. We have pitches named after both Jerry Devlin and Gerard Lawler, and in 2012, on the 10th anniversary of Gerard Lawler's murder, and his parents and brothers are here, in the face of the fact that no one had been charged, no inquest had been held, the police ombudsman had not produced a report, we as a club community convened our own community inquiry. The state had failed Gerard's family. We as a club would not. We gathered a panel of human rights experts, assisted by Relatives for Justice, and convened a court of public opinion. We called the evidence, we took the witnesses, and we wrote it down. And sometimes if you don't write things down, it didn't happen. And that's why Peadar's book is so important as well. Community spirit and bond and support that we provide for each other is a phenomenon which I have the privilege to observe in other GAA communities. And as special as the Hightown Road is to me, all of our communities are special, a trait which is strongly evidenced in Peadar's book. The clubhouse is where the Loughin Island families insisted that Al Hutchinson come and present himself in 2012 to be held account and public ridicule for the shameful cover-up that he attempted in respect of the murder of their loved ones. It's also where the Loughin Island families welcomed Dr. McGuire to come and tell them the truth in 2016. The clubhouse is where Katie Lavyarig hosted the last sport and built a memorial wall on the 20th anniversary of Gavin McShane's murder, and I still have broken fingers from the match played on that day. The Balahi Wolf Tones clubhouse is where the community gathered to support the family of Sean Brown, planting an oak tree on the 25th anniversary, attended by the President of the Association, Larry McCarthy. And I will always reference a powerful letter written by the Balahi Club chairman to every unit of our association on the event of the failure of Sean's inquest, wherein he outlined, and I recite, "As club, as friends and neighbours, we can no longer hold our dignified silence. As a community, we are furious at the treatment of the Brown family, and we actively seek the support and solidarity of our wider association at this time of legal and moral repugnance. As a unit of our association, we represent what's best about our society. However, what we have observed the Brown family endure in recent weeks and months, indeed years, is the lowest, and which no longer can be tolerated. We are indebted to the voluntary motions of solidarity, reciting expressions of concern by the recent county conventions of Derry, Tyrone and Armagh. We respectfully consider that this correspondence is considered by all units of our association at both club and county level, and we ask each chairman or the last person to lock your club gates, is this how you would accept your family, your club, your community, perhaps your own dignified memory to be treated? This book is an act of support and solidarity. I know there's many further examples of unbreakable community spirit and solidarity in this room. I referenced the above merely as a lived first-person experience. A Maori phrase references what it means to be a good ancestor. It states that a good ancestor is one who plants acorns for oak trees that they know they will never see, but will provide shade for future generations. This is what we do in our clubs, and which is so expertly captured and sensitively recorded by Peadar in his book. Perhaps a more local variation is Ar Scathach Céile a worry in the Dini, a phrase that was brought to my attention by Fergal Enright, who knows in the room. We take shelter and comfort in each other's shade. Today, and through this book, we take shelter and comfort from each other.
GD Vicarja, just in the spirit of honesty, I am extremely nervous. So if you notice the obvious shake in my voice, I hope it gets better. So GD Vicarja, thank you, Pauline and Nal, for your really kind and beautiful words. To Fáilte mór agah lig go oscail níomhmhara inniu agus an last special to show. So a welcome to all of you here today and to this special day. I must be honest and admit that I have pained quite a bit over what to say today. This book has dominated my life for the best part of 3 years, but I truly believe that it's not really my book. The memories included in this book belong to those who granted us the privilege to read them. This has been the overarching context of my efforts to take stock of this project over the last days and weeks, and the context that will inform what I'll say today. Before that, however, and Pauline made a brief mention of it, is that I want to initially make special mention of some remarkable people I met whilst writing this book and who are sadly no longer with us. One of the first families I met with for this project was the McShane clan from Keady, as Niall had mentioned earlier, in County Armagh. I drove down to Keady and met Cian McShane at the hurling club, and he directed me to the family home where I met his sister Alana. The pair talked to me about their brother Gavin and his total love of hurling. I was drowning in cups of tea and stuffed with sandwiches, pastries and biscuits as the details of family life in Keady came flooding in. Now, I'm not sure if they initially remembered me, but I knew the hurling club and their family from much earlier. In 2014, as Niall had mentioned, I remember going with my dad to a hurling match held between Keady Lavjarg and Niamh Belfast. I remember the crowds at the club that evening, people who had come out to show their support for the McShane family. You see, the match was held, as Niall had mentioned, for the 20th anniversary of the killing of 17-year-old Gavin McShane. I distinctly remember going upstairs in the clubhouse that evening, where I met this woman. She hugged me upon meeting me and treated me with such warmth that I thought she must have been family. She filled my paper plate with sandwiches and biscuits and cups of tea. And I remember the overwhelming feeling coming over me. The strange feeling of not really understanding what I had done to receive this affection from a woman I had never met before. She then began to talk to me about her son, Gavin, who wasn't much older than I was at the time of his killing. She showed me his hurls and his helmet and his trophies and medals, of which there are plenty, and his boots, which are now cast in metal. To those who knew her, Maria McShane was a source of warmth and light. She was defined by an indescribable strength of character, and the love she had for her family fueled an unstoppable determination to see justice done to the memory of her Gavin. I cannot help but see the parallels between my first encounter with Maria and the time I spent with Alana in Keogh. It is not only evidence that Maria passed on her incredible qualities to her children, but also evidence of what it means to people to have someone listen. Whilst this point is also true for every single person I interviewed, most of whom are in this room today, it particularly resonates with another person who is sadly no longer with us. I met Sean Hart in RFJ's Dungannon office after many emails and several phone calls back and forth across the Atlantic. He was an incredibly soft-spoken man with an infectious laugh and a very calming presence, something which I very much valued in the context of speaking to Sean about the loss of his two brothers. What I remember most from my time with Sean was his forthcoming honesty. He described to me how his memories of his brothers were limited because, as a young man, like many people, he sought out a better life by emigrating to Canada. It was a story I would hear many times over whilst writing this book, and a story I'm sure resonates particularly with the Irish people. And I think of today of several people unable to attend here through similar circumstances. What Sean was able to tell me, however, was that he and his brothers shared a deep love for the GAA. Despite the distance between Sean in Canada and his family back in Loch Macrory, County Tyrone, football kept a sense of connection between Ireland and Canada. Pardon me. Indeed, Sean dedicated much of his life to strengthening the bonds between Ireland and Canada through the GAA, holding multiple positions within Canada GAA. Not long after I met with Sean, he was announced as Canada's Irish Person of the Year. Another recent loss to the Loch Macrory community came last weekend as we learned of the passing of Mary Lowe. I do not doubt that anyone who had ever had the pleasure of meeting Mary will be heartbroken at this news. And our thoughts today are with her sons Cathal, Carl and Sean and the wider Lowe family. For those who did not know Mary, you have only to speak her name, with the many people in this room who did, to get to know and just to understand what a remarkable woman she was. Mary had an incredibly encouraging presence to her, which was most welcomed by myself, as she and her family were some of the first people I met whilst writing this book. She was also exceedingly funny and had a knack for storytelling that only Irish mummies have the good fortune of possessing. Again, making my life that bit easier. It became clear to me, however, that Mary made everyone's life that bit easier. She was someone who went to great efforts for those in her life, and for all the right reasons, there were loads of people in her life. What was most remarkable about Mary, however, was that she exuded all of these qualities despite the great loss that she had suffered. If anyone here ever attended one of my talks about this project, when we were seeking greater public awareness, you'll probably recognise the name of Brenda Logue. Mary lost her only daughter when Brenda was just 17. They were out shopping along with Mary's mother and Oma when an explosion killed Brenda along with 28 others. Mary carried this great pain in her life with incredible dignity and strength. And I don't think I misspeak when I say that she will be remembered most of all for being an unimaginably resilient person. I could say much more about Mary, Maria and Sean, and indeed the same and more for each and every person I met over the course of writing this book. Indeed, what speaks most to me when I think back over the process of writing this book is in fact the people. I will return to expand on this sentiment, but before that, I'd like to now share some insights into the interviewing and writing process itself. To write this book, I travelled the length and breadth of Ireland. I was hosted in kitchens, living rooms and offices, and put more miles on my car than I ever cared to admit to the insurance. However, this project began during lockdown, and several interviews actually took place virtually. Yet, no matter online or in person, some unexpected themes began to emerge. Most notably, it became clear that for the great majority of families, this was the first time anyone had taken the time to ask them about their loved ones. Particularly, it was the first time anyone had cared to ask them about their cherished memories. Excuse me. As a Gael, being a member of the GAA is being a Gael is as important a marker of identity as anything else that makes up an individual, who he or she is. And it was my intention to ask the type of questions which would redefine and reshape recorded memory so that the lasting legacy of each person is no longer just victim, but also Gael. I know from my own family's experience that every family has their script. If someone outside the family asks, and I emphasize if, about their experience of loss, there is always a script. This will almost invariably be focused on the circumstances of their loved one's death, and then the subsequent years of grief and impact of loss on the family. Indeed, every single person interviewed could tell me the details of their quote unquote case. The difficulty arose sometimes when I then mentioned that I wanted to know the before. I wanted to know the life that was lived on and off the pitch. What emerged then were new conversations between family members and friends of the family, where old memories were rediscovered and indeed shared for the very first time. And many families embarked on a journey of discovery, particularly where a parent was lost. And to be a witness to that has been beyond a privilege. After the interviews, I always made time before driving back to Belfast to visit the local GAA club. They were usually empty, with the exception of the odd lad using the gym, or the lonesome free takers sharpening their shooting. Walking around the pitches and car parks, I found that I got a real sense of the local people and community, something that was invaluable in enabling me to better understand the memories that I had just listened to. The GAA is so incredibly unique in this way. If you want to understand the Gael, visit the club. Indeed, I cannot stress the insight one can gain from such a simple thing, as the local GAA club, as Niall alluded to in his speech, was usually the safe haven of community and support a family could turn to in the wake of their loss. It was the GAA club where local people would come together in the darkest of moments. Local GAA clubs provided families with all sorts of support, ranging from being a space of escapism to a space for activism. Indeed, when I began this project, I made my first presentations at local GAA clubs, including my own as an initial sounding board for the project's stated aims. They were, are, and will remain unrivaled in their ability to act as a lens through which to view the true character and soul of communities across Ireland. A related point to this is an observation I've dedicated some words to in the book, and which I would like to read out to you today. There can be no doubt that the GAA and its membership suffered harm on a very large scale during the conflict. I make this observation as a means of giving, albeit limited, recognition to the many accounts of harm that I have heard during the interviewing process, accounts that I have not been able to record in the book, and that are undeniably deserving of an entire book in and of themselves. If you were a Gael living through the conflict in the north, you will undoubtedly relate to the following. In each interview I conducted, without exception, I was told anecdotes and accounts of intimidation, harassment, and violence endured over decades by people seeking to play and take part in the GAA in the north of Ireland. Whilst the entries to this book reflect these experiences, I want to draw specific attention to this subject and give some analysis to it. In conflict-related violence discourse, recent attention has been drawn to the different types of harm suffered by those who live through conflict, and whether our definitions of what experiences constitute harm are appropriate. In other words, are there events and behaviours experienced during conflict which, upon reflection, we would now regard as incidents of harm? Experiences which, at the time, we might have deep down known were wrong, but which went nonetheless unchecked or unacknowledged. During the interviewing process for this book, the anecdotes of experience such as being stopped and searched because a person was carrying a herd, wearing a GAA jersey, having team buses stopped and kit bags poured across the road, experiences of harassment and intimidation of Gaels would invariably be followed by a downplaying of the impact of that harassment. It wasn't as bad as everything else that was going on, or that's just the way it was. At the heart of the issue here is an idea that harm can become normalised and downplayed during conflict. And this often occurs when the harm forms part of a person's everyday. These experiences, however, are harms, and that they form the part of a person's habitual experience is immaterial to that fact. Moreover, none of these experiences need to be sensationalized in order to constitute a wrong. What is now most apparent to me, having interviewed members of the GAA across the island, is that Gaels living through the conflict in the north came to live with the expectation of being treated differently and violently because they chose to enjoy the sport they loved. The danger of not recognising and challenging this fact and the associated everyday harms is that we risk the perpetuation of past wrongful behaviour towards Gaels and the attitudes which facilitate it into the future. It should concern us all that some of those same attitudes towards the GAA persist within some elements of society today. And whilst no longer mainstream, those attitudes can have deleterious effects on the association. From motivating decisions regarding the allocation of public resources, clearly Casement Park, right through to the recent intimidation of clubs by extremists. Those actions share the same dangerous attitudes toward Gaels. They are wrong, they lead to harm, and they must not be normalised or tolerated in an equal society. Turning now to the content of the book, and there are several aspects I'd like to briefly mention. Firstly, I'd like to thank the authors of all the contributory articles. They add critical lenses and context through which the memories of the book must be understood. Each author volunteered their expertise and time to this project, and I'm deeply grateful for their contribution. To Anna, Tommy, Mark, Mike, Paul, Gramila Monig of Galer. Secondly, this book critically serves as the first comprehensive account of the impact of the conflict on the GAA. It does not, however, provide a statistical summary of the evidence I collected. This is by design. The entire ethos of this book has been to provide a much needed human lens to the increasingly polarizing use of stats and figures to serve engineered narratives. This book is a repository of memory and life, and I wanted to ensure that the key takeaway from this book are the human stories of each person. Thirdly, I want to acknowledge that it was not possible for me to include the memories of every Gael in this book. I firmly believe I made every reasonable effort to ensure that the next of kin for each identified Gael was contacted. And this task alone was a mammoth undertaking. Unfortunately, there is no single central repository of contact information for this type of work, and therefore there remains many memories of Gaels still to be recorded. I am, however, incredibly grateful for the assistance of many people and organisations in helping contact families who are included in this book, particularly to Brian McAvoy and the Ulster GAA. Lastly, I would like to reflect on my feelings of the book now that we're finally launching it today. When people talk about legacy, when you hear it as a buzzword in the news, or particularly when politicians drone on about solving legacy, I always wonder exactly what they mean in this context. For my family, for example, whenever a politician mentioned legacy on the news, it meant that my grandmother, my father, my aunts, and each of us thought of Peadar. On the outside, you might assume this stirred up grief and sadness, and you'd be right. For my grandmother and her children and my grandfather Joe while he was alive, this pain never faded. It has never faded. But that's only part of it, because in our family, Peadar's legacy is so much more than the tragedy of his death. To me, his legacy lives on in the way my grandmother and I have shared tears and laughter over her fondest memories of him, and his undeniable ability to bring crack into any room he entered. For all those people who talk about solving legacy, none of them have ever thought to ask my grandmother what she feels. She never asked to be associated with this term. But society's failure to collectively and consciously acknowledge her loss means that she still feels the sharp edge of that word, legacy. The same is true for each and every family in this room. No one in this country asked for conflict, and regardless of how you believe it came about, we must strive to bring the compassion and patience radiated by each person I interviewed for this book into our conversations about legacy. And my hope for this book is to help with that. To complete this talk, I would like to return to what I briefly mentioned earlier as being what speaks to me most when I think back over the process of writing this book, and read my closing remarks from the book. That is, people. Acknowledgement is one of the most powerful tools we, as individual and collective members of society, possess when we interact with one another. To be seen, to be heard, to be respected. These are the central qualities of human dignity that we each afford one another, that assures each of us of our equal worth as citizens. And it is more often a lack or denial of these qualities to a person or persons that precedes and perpetuates conflict. It is therefore unsurprising to learn that acknowledgement plays a central role in rebuilding relationships broken down by conflict. Indeed, acknowledgement is a fundamental pillar of transitional justice. During violent conflict, the circumstances bringing about victimhood, either physical injury or bereavement, not only have the effect of directly harming the victim, but also have the indirect effect, intentionally or not, of silencing the victim. What is crucial for any new society emerging from conflict is to reverse that silence. By looking to this class of people emerging from conflict, bearing all of its irreparable damage, and listening to their experiences and acknowledging their hurt, we help to restore the conditions necessary for equality of citizenship and ensure that the settings which preceded and perpetuated violent conflict no longer exist. This book began by quoting the old Irish saying, "Urscaithe céile war na daoine." The literal translation is people live in the shadow of one another. But its meaning is more accurately deciphered as the belief that people rely on one another for shelter. That we only truly live when we accept that no one person is an island. That is fundamentally what this book is about. As a people, we listen to one another, and that is how we grow. I thank you for lending your ears to the story of this book and for listening to the families and friends of some of the Lost Gaels. I want to just at the end, and it wasn't included in the speech because I knew he'd probably be a bit, he doesn't want the attention, but I want to make special mention of my dad, Mark, without whom this book would never have happened. It is his idea. It was him who fueled all of my work. No doubt over the last couple of months, all of you have been receiving constant texts and phone calls. And he's certainly my hero.
You wanted to ensure that the dignity of the memory that you were recording was something that needed to be matched in its presentation, and I do think you've achieved that. It's a beautiful book. If you could maybe just talk about the planning, the logistical planning of the book.
Thank you for your kind words, Alan. I suppose when we initially set out in this project, it was actually Owen Conley from Relatives for Justice who did a lot of the initial desktop research in compiling a database. And I've mentioned in the book, but for Owen taking up another role in Relatives for Justice, he would have undoubtedly been the co-author of this book. And many families in this room know Owen through his other role at RFJ. when we I suppose had the final database of the book, we asked ourselves what would we like to do with it, and RFJ had done some work with Jim Duffy and Freddie Clements on Children with the Troubles, and we believe that that work was a truly beautiful piece of work, and we thought it would be nice to emulate that in a certain sense. And it was critical, obviously, with the values and belief system that RFJ have, that families should be central in creating this project. So the design of the book, I suppose, comes from that essential kind of foundation belief that this is a project of absolute importance. Um, and in many ways, it's above any individual person. And we wanted to ensure that it was recorded and presented in a way that respected that. Um, and I think Marion have done a great job, and myself and Marion working together. And I particularly want to thank Connor from Marion Press and Wendy, who I believe did an exceptional job with it.
Just on that, the first edition is obviously hardback. The second, third, fourth editions will be paperback, so make sure you get your hardback copies for your bookcases. Des Fahy wrote a book, How the GAA Survived the Troubles. That was published in 2001. Why has it taken 23 years for a work of such obvious importance to be published? And I'm not holding you responsible if you're 25-ish.
I suppose there's many reasons for that. I think though sometimes a work like this takes someone to come. I mean, I'm born in the last day of 1988. I was fortunate to have not lived directly through the conflict, and I think maybe sometimes it requires someone to come from not the outside, but the kind of different perspective to things. Where, yeah, I think maybe that is one of the reasons where, Gaels are so connected to their club and their community that, in a sense, it probably requires someone from a little bit outside to come in and start recording this. We obviously, when we set out to do this, were surprised to learn that there wasn't any essentially recorded record of the impact of the conflict on the Troubles as well. And yeah, I would say probably from the outsider perspective, but also I think speaking to families and speaking to Gaels who are affected, it's still very raw. These stories are still very raw, and the GAA community is so tight knit that one Gael loss reverberates around that community. And in that sense, I imagine that would be one of the reasons why. In terms of a book like this, and in terms of actually interviewing families, it requires an organisation. It required Relatives for Justice. It requires an organisation of people, and I don't mean myself, but the people in RFJ who have spent decades working with families as families themselves in supporting, memorialising, and leading campaigns, and earning trust of people over decades. And a work like this requires that totally solid foundation in order to get the buy-in to ensure the accuracy. So when I set about doing this work, although I'm only 25 and a young lad and stuff doing this, I had the benefit of coming with RFJ's name. People knew what to expect to a certain degree, and having Pauline and the support staff behind that ensured that a work like this could be completed in a very safe manner where families were supported as well. Because work like this can be It's tough, and it's not fair to go into a room and ask a family to recall their memories if there isn't that net behind and that surety to give them the confidence to know that this is a safe space and that they will be looked after.
Yeah. I know, obviously, I know you know that you come to this with an academic pedigree, but in terms of your methodology, I know that you had a rigorous approach. And the only qualifying factor was membership of the association. Can you tell me a little bit more about your approach and how you conducted your research?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, Owen initially began the research, and then ourselves worked together. We went through the likes of Lost Lives, archives, books that were written about the conflict, and our own record as Relatives for Justice, reaching out to families. And so as I say, it was a mammoth task in the sense that we had our own families that were already within the RFJ system. We had reached out to other victim support groups like the Paffinucan Centre, WAVE, and SEF, who contacted their members on our behalf to let them know they could reach me. Any publication where we saw that someone was lost and there was some sort of link to the GAA, we made a note of. And then we went about a process of confirming that with clubs, local people, and families if we could. And we also obviously owe a great debt of gratitude to the Ulster GAA, who contacted every single club in Ulster on our behalf to let them know about this project. We also did public campaigns, and we were obviously up at St Andrews that night and just tried to raise as much awareness about the project as possible. So that's how we went about confirming and having our list. And I'm not saying that this list that's in the book is total or final, and I imagine with the publicity of this book, we might actually get more families who reach out. But given we started this during lockdown, we had to have a cut-off date at some point. But I feel that it is as accurate as it could have been.
Yeah. Um, I think this book has the capacity to become a living project. I feel that the book can be a catalyst for further focus and remembrance. And I know that's something that you've thought of. Can you just scope us through some of the working objectives that can see the project grow in terms of its importance as an oral and written archive?
Yeah, I suppose when we had the idea of the book, we had a place within this broader GAA legacy project. When I went out to families, like I mentioned in my talk, the McShane family, there are medals, hurls, and trophies and boots. And some families have physical, uh, physical memorabilia of their loved one, and those are incredibly important. Um, Not most of all, of course, to the families. They're incredible pieces of history, deserve a platform as well. And so, in my head, I have an idea of if families would like to participate in it, if we could work with the GAA in getting a permanent exhibition somewhere where we could have some physical shirts, jerseys, hurls, medals put together as a memorial, as a living memorial that people could go and see and look at. You know, we talk about obviously the RFJ family quilts. Kevin Lynch's All Ireland hurling medal is stitched into the quilt. These are the types of things that really make it real for people when they can see and feel something. And so I feel if that is definitely something in my head where this project could go. And we've been fortunate enough to have the support of the GAA, and particularly the extremely kind and encouraging words of Gareth Burns in that sense. So I can see the project growing on to something like that.
Absolutely. Just finally, because I know some other contributors, if you could perhaps just give us a final insight into how you feel the role that the GAA has played in uniting and supporting communities at times of, the most sensitive, unimaginable loss.
I mean, I'm sitting on stage with a figure in his local community who has. I interviewed families from St Enda's, and each of them, what they said about you as an individual now and as in your capacity as an organiser for St Enda's, how important the club has been in supporting families, in letting them know that they're not alone and they have a community behind them in any campaign that they wish to lead. But not only that, GAA clubs are also fantastic, and sport in general is fantastic at providing an escape. And the GAA provided exactly that for a lot of families. In the wake of unimaginable loss, the GAA club was where they could go to and play sport and feel that sense of support around them and community. I have only to think of the RFJ bringing quilts to local communities. They're put up in local GAA clubs. So local GAA clubs are central to community life in Ireland. And when you have communities affected by conflict, those GAA clubs reflect that story. And it's the same individuals that are running the GAA clubs are also running other community activism. So in that sense, they mirror each other, and you cannot overstate the importance of clubs.
Thank you. I think I'll hand over to Polly. But my last remark, I know that a lot of people have travelled from outside Belfast. There's actually a hurling match at Carnival Park today at 2 o'clock. The game for Gaza. There's some of the best hurlers in Ireland are going to be playing there. So if you've came this far, you're not too far. So go up the street, Carnival Park at 2 o'clock.
And Peadar, great insight, Peadar, from somebody so young. It'd be great now to, and I know Brenda's just waiting her chance to get up here, to hear some personal reflections from some of the families. So it gives us great pleasure to welcome Emma Rogan, a daughter of Adrian, Brenda McAnespy, sister-in-law of Eden, and Jude White, a son of Peggy. So it'd be lovely if you could come up and just give some of your personal reflections.
I was going to be asked a question or two. I didn't really realise that I was going to have to speak. But first of all, as I said, it's more an honour a bit in shot you freshen. It's a massive honour to be here today as well. To have a look at the book, and I said I just briefly looked at it here this morning. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And probably as someone that has probably slept, drank, ate football all my life, to have the GAA involved with it as well. It's an absolute privilege to be here. As I said, the GAA, and I think both Colleen and Peadar particularly, I think emphasised that the importance that GAA has in everybody's lives, the length and breadth of the country, but probably more important in the northern counties. It creates a set of identity. It gives young girls, boys, whatever, that chance to get away from what was going on maybe at home and the troubles and all the rest of it. I didn't directly, as I said, I wasn't born in one of the northern 6 counties, but in Monaghan, so I probably had an idea and had a little insight into what was going on in the north. But what I would like to reflect on, maybe it's something that I think the book will play a major role, is creating, as you say, that chance for people outside of the northern 6 counties to see what exactly nationalists and GAA members suffered during the Troubles, because, to be honest, a lot of them either purposely or unpurposely maybe haven't a clue what went on. And I'll give an example of that whenever I had to do the Laker Gael programme for the GAA, because I played football for many years for Monaghan. I'll give them a plug as well. But we were invited down to Waterford to do an interview, and then the TG4 cameras came up to Athenry and spent the day there. They were particularly interested in the troubles and what happened to Aidan, so we had brought them down to the checkpoint. And to the young, as I said, the videographers, the photographers, whatever, they actually had said to me they did not realise what was actually going on in the north for many years. So they had a big interest in it as well. So when the programme was eventually aired, we were meant to get a preview of it, but unfortunately, due to COVID, we were the same as everybody else. The programme went ahead. We didn't know what was going to take place in it. But it is a very, very popular programme, maybe in the country at the minute. But as I was visiting a house of ours in Funny, they're here as well, Angela Boyle, who also lost her father and her uncle Owen Boyle and Francie McCahey during the Troubles. We were all sitting in their house actually talking about the Lakewood Gale programme. And Angela's children, some of them were living down in Limerick and Tipperary, and they'd be very, very friendly with hurlers and top class hurlers like Cambridge and other footballers and hurlers down that part of the country. And there was one of them there that particular night. And when I came in, somebody introduced me to him as Brendan McNess, that's the girl that was in the Lakewood Gale programme. And he started a discussion on it, and he was going, God, I watched your programme, it was very interesting. But he made the point, I had not a clue of anything that went on in the north. He said, as my own family didn't, he said, there was a break in the programme, and when he came back up, it was about the checkpoint, and it was about Aidan when he was shot. And he started giving out to his father, would you switch that back, please, to the football programme I was watching? And the father said, no, that's the same programme. So my point is, so many people don't realise what GAA families went through in the north, and I think the book will give an excellent opportunity for the story to be told. And I do think there is that momentum there. I know the Lakewood Gale programme did cover so much of what happened to Aidan, and I mean, to me, it wasn't about me, the programme, but I was so happy that Aidan's story again got a mention in it. And I think it's very, very important for families here to get their stories told, to have that opportunity to have their personal stories told of what their sons or daughters' lives were about. And I think Aidan's family were probably very lucky in that way that they did get an awful lot of publicity. And I think there is that opportunity there to give even more, more stories to families to get that opportunity out. And I know, Peadar, you mentioned there an idea, and I think it's an excellent one where families maybe, if they could come together to have memorabilia, and I've only thrown this out and you might have looked at it already. The museums there in Croke Park, I mean, why? I mean, I remember it came to me one day to have my All-Star jersey or something put up in, maybe there was a week of an opportunity for GAA players to have that there. I mean, people are going to go in and look at that for a day or a week or whatever, but there's no reason whatsoever that there couldn't be a permanent spot in that museum for memorabilia or whatever of people that have lost their lives, GAA members that have lost their lives in the Troubles. And I mean, as you said, Jarrett Burns there at the minute, but to me, that's something that people elect and Brent, the country, would have an idea to go and see and get, those personal stories out. It's just really excellent. I hand over here to the rest of what I said. It is an honour, and I thank Peadar. I know speaking, and as I said, being involved in the GAA, but I know with the AIDS case, just to have those personal stories, the mothers, and I think the resilience and everything of the families is another point you made. I know in Aidan's case, and I think everybody resonated with that, the mothers that were there for them through thick and thin, they never lost their faith, they never lost that support for their loved ones. And as I said, I think as a family, we have to remember the ones that have passed away. And as I said, in Aidan's case, we remember Lizzie and John, who didn't live to see his court case, and to Ailish as well. And I think she was involved she was involved heavily with the Relatives for Justice. The years and years of time, effort, sweat and pain that they put into fighting for justice for Aidan. And as I said, the rest of the families out there as well, it's very, very important to remember all of them as well.
The first time I ever saw my dad cry was in 1972 in Milltown. It was dead awkward, you know, when you're a young fella, about 12 or 13, seeing your dad cry, and he was crying because he was burying a mate of his, a guy called Frank Carr. I know out there, most of you are far too young to remember, way back into the, I suppose, the late 60s, 70s, but this state has been murdering Catholics since 1921. We're just here today because they happened to murder our relatives who were part of this organisation called LOST GAELS, or the GAA. And that day, back in July 1972, I never really forgot it. We were from the Armour Road. The Houston's in from the country. That's the really nice part of Belfast. So it is. We all don't live over in this place called West Belfast. Although we all eventually ended up in West Belfast. That murder of Frank Carr, who was a very inoffensive, a grumpy wee man, as I can remember, with 5 kids, changed his life, and it probably changed the life as a killing does of anybody. His 2 sons from Turf Lodge were the finest hurlers one could ever come across. Jim played for Antrim and for Ulster for years, and Liam played for Ardoyne and Wolf Tones and Shannon. What was seen today is, I mean, it's 3 years of sort of really hard work, but the context, I suppose, in Belfast, as opposed to maybe some of the smaller rural parishes, is in 1968, there were 2 big competitions that would have affected you if you lived in Belfast. One was a team called Manchester United won the European Cup, which is of total irrelevance to somebody like me. But the other is that Down won the All-Ireland. And the school I was at was St Bernard's in South Belfast. And the Down team came around to bring the cup round. And not one teacher in that school or the principal had a clue what this was about. The principal was a guy called Mr. Kennedy, and he sent for me to bring Sean O'Neill and Colin McElharney and people like that around all the classes. A Lough Island man, I'm just informed. And it's amazing to think, in parts of Belfast, the GAA, I can remember being slapped. Maybe I needed it for playing a hurling game in that particular school. So, to go to a school in this town, you could have either ended up, the GAA was your soul, or it simply didn't exist. When you try to explain the GAA to people, you've got to sort of be tactful. I mean, to say the GAA as a sport organisation doesn't describe it, in my view, in any way. The GAA is the life and soul of virtually every community that I know anything about. In fact, when I leave here today, I'm heading to Armagh to see Slough-Neil against Cushendall in the All-Ireland, in the Ulster Club semi-final. We don't have Sunday dinners in our house. We have Monday dinners. And when people come to our house and say, why do you eat on a Monday? It's very simple. We don't eat on a Sunday because Sunday is GAA day. And you're either at a match, you're going to a match, or you're coming from a match. I met Gordon Lyons, the communities minister, there a few weeks ago, and I was saying to him, I see the GAA rascals are giving you a terrible time for not going to their match, or for not visiting a match. And he says, well, my religious beliefs don't allow me to go to things on Sunday. And I said to him, look, we Catholics only play on Sundays to annoy people like you, and it works. Because, on a lighter note, I often feel my grandfather, a great grandfather, I believe, was a Protestant, and I'm not going to hold that against him. But he made a sort of a mistake in his life. He met a woman from the Falls Road, married her, became a Catholic, and ever since then my life's been pretty shit. So it has. You know, I could have been head of the special branch instead of getting the shit kicked out of me by them over the years. Um, the one danger point, I suppose, in in being part of the GA, let's not try to get above ourselves. We do have something here, in my opinion, which is quite unique. When you tell people in England or on your travels that we don't pay our players, nobody really believes you. They don't believe you. What do you mean? You don't pay? No, you don't. After you win in All Ireland, you go home and you're delivering milk the following day, or you're teaching in a primary school, or you're doing. People simply do not believe that. We are not a sport organisation per se. We are. It's part of your DNA. It's part of your soul. It's part of your community. Your whole life, effectively, is wrapped around this organisation. And I know we have to put up with Gaelic football, but you know, if I ever get my way, there'll only be one sport in the GAA. I'll be hurling the camogie. So well. Finally, Peadar, your eulogy to your dad is very, very appropriate. He's and I'm sure your parents are very proud of you, very, very proud of you today. And again, we have something really special here. Let's share it and not get too above ourselves. There's no similar organisation. There's no similar organisation that has suffered as much, and there's no organisation that can survive the way we survive, because we're not about personalities, we're not about money, we're about club, we're about county, and we're about community. And I mean, I really do feel this contribution you've made is the beginning of a living project, and probably the GAA version of Lost Lives. So well done, and thank you very much for your contribution.
I'll not keep this as long as Jude did. Places to go, people to see, Jude. Look, I just want to thank you, Peadar. You said that you went into people's homes and clubs and offices, but it's not very often people get into our house. And you come in, and to be able to ask us to recite and ask us our memories and to do it in such a sensitive way and to be able to open up to you is something that doesn't happen very often, because people don't get to see that part because it's very personal. But to be able to talk to you, it was just like as if you were just part of our family to come in and be able to. And you said, oh, you come under the umbrella of RFJ, but it's not. It was you. You made it very easy for us to speak to you and made it a very easy process. And when we came in today and I opened the book, and this is my 5-year-old, 85, aren't you? And he says, there's my Granda Frosty and the picture. And that book and the book that you've produced for lots of families, and I know you said not absolutely every Gael can be included in that's fair enough, but that's a book that's going to go down in history that he will read, and my 1-year-old will read, and I'll be proud for them to read it, because that's, you asked us what was he like, and that'll give them some insight into what their Granda Frosty was like, and not that he was a statistic in a book, and he died on the 18th of June along with 5 other people. He was a person, and you made that book and the people in that book come to life. And it's unbelievable.
So there's nothing else for me to say other than a huge gratitude to the families who gave so much and who continue to give so much, each and every one of you. And to every other person in this audience that made the effort to be here today, to Peadar for all his great work, to Owen, to Niall and Jude and Brenda and Emma and Mark and Andre and every single member of RFJ who turned up here today to help out. I hope I haven't left anybody out, have I? Nobody left out. So massive mila buíochas to each and every one of you. And Slán will you safe home. Peadar will be in the foyer with signing books, and books are for sale there, but nothing else left for me to do, only say, Girl, my Sorry.